That was very loud. Sorry, Sheriff Adkinson. Hey.
Hey, we're live. Oh, okay. We're good.
Live.
We're live. Walton County Sheriff Mike Adkinson, along with our trusty public information officers extraordinaire, Miss Lindsay Darby and Miss Corey DeBridnia, and this is the Sheriff Live. And for our regular viewers, thank you for being back with us. And for our new folks, let me just tell you where we're at. Walton County, Florida. We're halfway between Pensacola and Tallahassee, running from the Walton County line in Alabama to the Gulf of Mexico, about 1,200 square miles. And I get a chance to represent the men and women of the Walton County Sheriff's Office, which is a myriad of things here in Walton County. Everything from law enforcement operations, the Walton County Jail, 911, animal control, or we like to call animal care, and the Walton County Fire Rescue north of the Bay, as well as the EMS service. So we're a little bit of everything, right? We think it's great stuff, and this is kind of my opportunity to talk to my bosses. We do this. We try to do it twice a month. We talk about what's going on both locally and nationally. If you have a question, here's my caveat: I don't guarantee that I'm right. I'm guaranteed that we'll try and get you an answer. And so with that, we've had a lot of stuff going on, and so this last week, I think one of the biggest things that we're kind of excited about, and I think it's a great opportunity, is had a chance to partner with Russell Hughes, our superintendent of schools here in Walton County. And Mr. Hughes and I were able to speak to the Board of County Commissioners about really the future of Walton County, which is the needs of infrastructure. You know, I think it's important. Many of you know that we're one of the fastest growing counties in the United States. 6 or 7, depend on who you ask, out of 4,000 counties, and the fastest growing municipality in the state of Florida, which is Freeport. So Mr. Hughes and I, we work together very closely, and just a tremendous working relationship, and really love those folks at the Walton County School District. But he and I often talk about the need to plan in the future. You know, what facilities the school needs, what facilities the sheriff's office needs, but also what does the Board of County Commissioners need? And it's important that we all talk and that we know what they're planning. You know, an example I gave when I spoke to the board was a few years ago. We're in desperate need of a new fire station in Mossy Head, the Mossy Head community. And some folks from the Board of County Commissioners came to me a couple years ago and said, hey, there is 3 acres for sale right here adjoining this property. You ought to consider buying this, look X, Y, or Z. But what they didn't know, and I didn't know, is the board actually owns 75 acres, like 100 feet away. So, and we would have looked at it and done our due diligence, but I think it speaks to this point of you need to be talking.
Yeah.
So we need to know what the other constitutional officers need. We need to know what the board needs. And what does that look over 20 years?
Yeah. Having a plan in place to...
Yeah. And it's organic, right? I mean, it can change. There's certainly things about it that need to change, but we're in the middle of building a $42 million radio system. Well, the last time this was planned was 2007-ish, 2006. And there were some things, if you can anticipate some of this growth, you can do things a lot differently and really mitigate cost in the future.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of stuff we're looking at. How do we reduce cost but deliver the level of service?
What are the dangers of playing catch up?
Well, I think it's tremendously expensive. You know, when the radio system was originally built, they needed 12 towers. Mm-hmm. They built 3. Now we need 22.
Yeah.
And we're building, so that means there's 8 of those towers, or excuse me, there's 10 of those towers we're now going to build at 2024 cost. When we should have built them at 2008 cost. That's a big deal, right? A lot of money. But that's one example of, I think, where we can work together. And I know the other constitutional officers, have needs as well. But if we're going to serve the citizens of this county, it behooves us to plan where we're going to spend and delivery of services. So I was grateful for Mr. Hughes, and I was grateful for the BCC willingness to hear it. They authorized, and we all have agreed to have a joint meeting in the north, central, and south part of the county, open to the public, where the school board, the superintendent, the constitutional officers, and the Board of County Commissioners and myself will all meet, and we'll hear each other, and that's important, to hear each other and see what's going on and what we feel is happening.
Great. What does that look like moving forward? What's the first step?
Well, I suggested, and Mr. Hughes concurred, and the board concurred, which is to get a facilitator, which is somebody to help manage that meeting with us. You have a lot of strong personalities. You have different boards, and you have different, and really, different services they have to provide. So I think we're going to look and find somebody to help facilitate that meeting, to keep us on task, is to keep us moving forward, so it doesn't become a circus, if you will. You know, we're all talking over each other. We need to make sure that we have a fruitful discussion. So we're going to suggest a facilitator. We're researching now and give that name to the board, and then we'll have to advertise it. When all those entities meet, you have to advertise that in the public. They can't just meet on their own without advertisement. So hopefully in the next 60 days, we'll have maybe a date for the first meeting set, and then we'll advertise that, obviously.
Yeah. Our first question is from Brian Campbell on Facebook.
Okay.
He said, are the officers at the board meetings contract? Do they work at the board's direction? Are they sworn to uphold the Constitution?
2 out of 3 are yes. They are sworn. They are not contract, and yes, the Constitution applies to everybody.
Yes. So
let me tell you how that works. So just kind of people understand from that standpoint. We don't make decisions who stays or goes at a board meeting, right? So my bailiffs are there. That's required by Florida's Constitution that the sheriff or his designee, in this case a deputy sheriff, must attend every meeting requested by the Board of County Commissioners. What we have told our staff is, what I've told my deputies is, we don't make decisions about who speaks or who does not speak, how long they speak or how long they don't speak. That's not appropriate. Because we don't want to ever be involved in anything that may potentially limit free speech, right? Our number one job is the mitigation safety risk. Is this safe or appropriate? The chair of the Board of County Commissioners can make decisions based on whatever their rules are and whatever the constitutional freedoms or constitutional rights, who is allowed to speak, right? So the balance is, somebody may say, for instance, I think Mr. Campbell's question gets down to, well, I was speaking, why was I asked to leave? One person can also not hijack a meeting, but that's not the sheriff's decision. I don't decide who gets to speak. The board has to make that decision, but they also have to be willing to live with that decision, because if you limit someone's free speech and you use the sheriff's office to assist with that, you can be held potentially liable for that.
Yeah.
And hopefully that answers his question.
Yeah, but the deputies at the courthouse and at the board meetings work for you, and they are assigned to that. That is their assigned
so many
position.
are assigned to. I assign so many to judges, and I assign so many to Board of County Commission meetings. There's also a deputy at school board meetings. But the 2 that are constitutional, just to be clear, that are absolutely mandated, are the court proceedings and the BOCC meetings, the Board of County Commissioner meetings. They request them at other places as well too, but you won't hear a deputy say what someone can or can't say, or when they should or should not speak, unless directed by the board, or you're, what I would say, incite to riot or something like this, something that endangered the public or was completely disruptive to the meeting. Yeah, if you stand up and start screaming in the middle of the meeting, somebody's going to come get you.
Yeah. Beth Niblett, who works at our jail, is on. A question from YouTube from username Destroyer TF. What are you going to do about speeders on Highway 98? Go ahead. No, I was just going to say we've added 2 additional deputies to our traffic unit.
2 additional deputies to our traffic unit. Our traffic unit has been pretty active this last year or so. We've had quite a bit more enforcement, and it's paid dividends. We actually look at the traffic number of wrecks across the county. That's one of the things we track and look at. We had a pretty significant reduction this last year, not just in crashes, serious crashes, but also in fatalities, that's really the ultimate measure. We still struggle on 98 with a couple of things. One is the volume of traffic is such that even a little bit of high speed is a problem. And the other thing is distracted driving. So those are the things that we try to emphasize. But we have traffic units that that are south of the bay. That's what they do from daylight to dark. They stay basically on 98 and 331. Can't be everywhere, but we certainly try. And it's every deputy's responsibility, not just a traffic unit.
Yeah. Steve Chansey wants to know, hi, Walton County Sheriff's Office question. Why not use satellite form communications among the county? Did you ever consider data link AirMed uses? It's cheaper than towers and acreage, and it's great for long range.
So there are actually some legal requirements about LMR, land-based mobile radio. That is, when you build a system, the State Department of Emergency Management determines, so you have to have a redundancy that is besides the satellite. But yeah, we are looking at, in fact, we looked at a service like FirstNet, which is something, the National Broadband Public Safety Initiative, which we are a participant in. So interesting to your point, we're going to have a redundancy that will be the data as well too. So we're going to do both. We don't just do one, because if you have a hurricane or whatever, we have to make sure they both work. So we do.
Great. Steve Kramer, do any Mexicans in Walton County have a driver's license?
Yeah, I mean that's a little bit of a ridiculous question, right? So
yeah. And then Mahia wants to know, I feel like your probation department needs to be looked at. It's set up for people to fail. It's not right, and the policies need to be redone. Actually,
so
probation
is
isn't.
Probation is not a function at the sheriff's office. So probation is either a function of, if it's misdemeanor probation, that's county probation. That's the Board of County Commissioners. They handle that. And then if it's a felony, it's state probation and parole, which is the Florida Department of Corrections. But actually really has nothing to do with us from that standpoint.
Okay. Dottie Nest. Hi, Dottie. She said, good evening. Is there any update on the series of complaints against and by county employees, including Walton County administration personnel, that are being reviewed? I believe complaints are related to a recent reopened case involving potential fraud by a former county employee.
So just in general, the way this works is when we get a complaint, we look at them to determine whether or not there's any merit. And I think this is one of the things that people get confused about. We have to review any complaint. So if you call in and let's just say that somebody says Dottie kidnapped the Lindbergh baby, right? A deputy still has to go out there, and they're going to take an initial report. But it's highly improbable that Dottie Nist was behind the Lindbergh baby. We get multiple of these a month, if I'm being honest, with people filing complaints, particularly during election season and things of that nature. Doesn't mean there's not merit to them. It means you can't just say, refer them to the Department of Law Enforcement. You have to at least review them and look at them to determine whether or not there's any merit, and whether or not A, the sheriff's office is the appropriate entity to go forward, or B, whether or not it needs to be referred to another entity, right? So anything that we're reviewing now will have to meet those criteria. We'll look at them, but I'm not going to allow the sheriff's office to become a tool by which I can besmirch someone's reputation simply by calling in a complaint and then immediately going online and saying, oh, they're under investigation, right? So investigation is not an admission or a proclamation of guilt. It is simply that. It is an investigation or a review to determine whether more investigation is appropriate. So we have to be careful, particularly during election years, and when you have people already talking about suing each other. So, before these complaints, several of these complaints before they came in, people were discussing suing each other. And I know maybe in the public may find this hard to believe, but sometimes people try to file reports simply to help their lawsuit. I know that's shocking to many of you, but that does happen. Mm-hmm. And then there are occasions that there clearly merit that things have to go forward and be reviewed. My rule of thumb, and I actually said this to Corey and Lindsay before we got started, is when it gets to a certain level, if it involves somebody running for office, somebody, an elected official, some version of that, if it gets to the point, for instance, if you had a complaint against a Board of County Commissioner because they're involved in my budget process and they're elected, we would listen to the complaint and say, is there any merit, or is it just ridiculous, right? Is it totally ridiculous? And then we would refer it to another entity if there was merit to go forward. But I have to tell you, a lot of what people call the sheriff's office about, a lot of it is not illegal. It's stuff people don't like. Mm-hmm. I don't like this. I think it's unethical. Mm-hmm. Remember, it's not, just because you don't like it doesn't make it illegal. So the short version of all that is that we review the complaints as a timely manner as we can. Those that are appropriate to be continued on, we will continue on investigating them. If not, if appropriate, we will refer them to somewhere else. And the third version is if they're they don't meet a criminal predicate, we're not going to go any further with it. And we would just simply say, hey, look, we don't think there's a crime. You need to go take this somewhere else. And if somebody else disagrees with us, so be it. But that's kind of the short version.
Yeah. Dottie, I hope that answers your question. If you have a follow-up,
Trying to give a full
feel
answer.
free.
I want to give a kind of. I actually like this kind of a long form discussion format because then I can say it.
Yeah. Great. Shannon Lynn wants to know on Facebook, if someone posts a death threat towards another person without necessarily naming them on social media, how is that handled? Would you investigate internet crimes, or should it go to a different department or agency?
No, it can come to us to start with, and we have to look at it because a lot of times what it is, it's as you said, they didn't say, was it one time, is it multiple times? Did they name it by somebody by name? Did they qualify it? In other words, what does qualifying mean? If you do this, then I will do that. That's called a qualified case. What I would say, the short version is go ahead and call us. Let's file a report. Let us take a look at it and determine kind of what I said to Dottie. Does it meet the criteria to go forward with an investigation? But I would definitely say go forward. If somebody is threatening you, even if that is through veiled threats, it's important for us to go ahead and review it and at least make a record of it as well too.
Yeah.
And we have a cyber crimes unit, so they're more than capable. They're very good, actually.
Yeah. Robert Curry says, thank you for all you do. Meadows wants to know, it's a similar question to one we had earlier on YouTube. What's being done about all the racing happening on Highway 98? It's frequent. Specifically, she lives close proximity to Otto's car wash, and after they clean their cars, they pull out onto Highway 98 with obnoxious, illegal exhaust popping all the way to 393.
Right.
I mean, I'm not a traffic unit, but is the exhaust?
Yeah, it can be when it reaches a certain level, a certain decibel level. That's a little bit, again, that's one of those things. It's just, to her point, it's kind of obnoxious, right? I mean, that's the short version of it. What we try and do is to direct our traffic, not just our routine deputies that works there in that neighborhood, but also the traffic unit towards more enforcement. But I can tell you, I actually see the numbers pretty regularly. They've been pretty active. They've been pretty active over there.
Yeah.
The exhaust, not as much. So that I don't think we've looked at that as much, but that's certainly something we can review and see.
Okay. Justin Bird, how do I go about making a complaint about a deputy? Who do I need to call?
So you can call the sheriff's office and tell the name of the deputy and ask to speak to their supervisor. And depending on the nature of the complaint, you can either ask to speak to their supervisor, or there's what's called a watch commander. That means somebody is in charge of the county for the day, and they will call you back and take your complaint. If you go to whether it's a formal written complaint or it's something that maybe doesn't rise to that level, up to whatever it may be. But yeah, you can just call and say that you have a complaint against the deputy or any staff member from that standpoint, and somebody will go out there and call you, and then if you want to go forward, they'll take your complaint.
Yeah, and we have a place on the website too, if you want to go.
We also have a place on the website. You can also email us the complaint, and we'll refer it to their supervisor for review.
Yeah. I hope that answers your question. If you have a follow-up, just let us know. AJ Smith says, doing a great job, Sheriff. Keep it up.
Appreciate our friend Sheriff Smith over in Franklin County.
Philip Canterbury, can the Sheriff's Department step up enforcement on working vehicle equipment laws, specifically working headlights and other equipment? And where does that, and just for Philip's edification, where does that fall on like what you encourage the deputies to focus on while doing traffic?
So, I actually like this question because I think a couple of things. There used to be inspections. Many years ago, people had to have vehicle inspections.
Lindsay and I were just talking about this today.
I actually think
I didn't know that in Florida.
No, there used to be vehicle inspections many years ago.
Like in the 70s.
I think maybe the early 80s. But I actually think that's a good thing because like Mr. Canterbury, I see vehicles all the time with tail lights out, bumpers off, things of that nature. So to kind of that point, what we try and do, Mr. Canterbury, is we stop those folks, generally trying to give them a warning or what's called a fix-it ticket. And so we say, look, here's the citation, but if you get it fixed within X amount of time, the fine will be dismissed or dropped. But a lot of times what we do is go ahead and put a warning in it. So until we stop them the second time, we don't know.
Yeah.
So in other words, if Corey's headlight is out on her car, or a badly cracked windshield, for instance, we may stop her, give her the warning, but until she stopped a second time, that's when they would actually probably issue a citation. But I actually think it's important, and I really think that a vehicle inspection is not a bad thing because you're on the roadway, and just making sure people have their brake pads and those things taken care of. I think it's important.
Yeah. I know there's some states that still do it. Virginia, for example, still has.
I actually think it's a good, I mean, I'm not generally in favor of more just governmental bureaucracy, but that's a safety issue to his point. The thing I'm struggling with lately, talking about equipment, is the brightness of these halogen lamps. These LED headlights, they're too bright. Some of these are way, way, way too bright. And we get a lot of complaints about that.
Yeah.
And I've noticed it myself.
People think they have their brights on.
They think they have their brights on. They're really, really bright lights. And
yeah. Okay. Tanya Amnovich, I've spoken to a few businesses on Highway 90 that have complained about unpermitted roadside vendors. The deputies who have responded have been told either that the deputies don't enforce county ordinances or that they don't enforce the ordinance in question. I'm assuming those deputies are misinformed.
No, so typically what happens is we refer those to code enforcement. So even if we go out there, there's a little bit of an issue with enforcing county ordinances for certain things. It can be problematic. So what should happen is when we go out there, we would take the name of the individuals, right, and what they're doing, and go ahead and refer it immediately to county code, and then they can do the follow-up issue. But we won't cease and desist on a county ordinance like that unless it's an imminent risk to someone's safety. But to your point, I know exactly what you're talking about, because in that bigger right-of-way out of Mossy Head, sometimes we'll see people set up. And a lot of times deputies will stop and say, look, you can't do this. You need to pack up and move on. But we need a mechanism to stop having them do it repeatedly. And I think Mr. Corman's now back over code enforcement, I think. And so what I'll do, Mr. Monovich, I will follow back up with him and just ask how we can help do a better job of cleaning that up. So maybe if you'll shoot me an email too, just so remember, Corey will get it to me and I'll reach over to county code myself.
And I want a little bit of a success story to come out tonight, and Lindsay, I'm sure will perk up here. Ted Brown has asked us over the last quite a long time about the
Frangista. It's got to be the chains at Frangista.
About the chains. Yeah. And I had code enforcement reach out to us about Ted's complaint, and she said that they are not supposed to be there and that she's going to be reaching out to them. So it was kind of a success story. To Ted's credit, he kind of stayed on it and was like, hey, why isn't anything being done about it? But code enforcement did reach out to them and get that moving.
But I will take, just to Mr. Monovich's point, the reason deputies don't do that as much is because they've got a gun and a badge on, right? And so a lot of times people believe they're speaking with authority of criminal law. So imagine if a deputy starts coming by and saying, look, your grass is too high, which can be an ordinance too, right? Those kind of or trash in your yard.
Yeah.
It can get, we try to stay out of regulatory schemes. That's as much as we can.
Yeah.
But it does, I agree with it. It needs to be followed up on so we can get it over there to them.
Yeah. Heather Meyer, is there anything that can be done about the sightseeing helicopters in Miramar Beach who turn around over Pompano Joe's? It's become too much, and they fly 100 to 200 feet over my home.
Yeah, we have complained. I will tell you that you are not the only one complaining. We've had a lot of complaints about that over the years. We've called it into the FAA. We have very limited enforcement of that. I actually agree with you. It's problematic. And there was even an issue about where they were landing. They were landing in some lots, and I'm being honest with you. I thought it was illegal. I mean, they were landing in some that it actually wasn't. Again, don't confuse what I don't like with what's illegal. But I'll follow back up. But I actually don't think. I think you have to call in that complaint to the FAA.
Yeah.
They get a lot of complaints for that, though.
Yeah.
Now, your Board of County Commissioners, let me say this. They may have some limited control of that through county ordinance. I'm not telling you they do, but that may be a place to start with. If you're down there, your commissioner is Donna Johns, is your District 5 commissioner. What I would do is reach out to her office and bring that up and let them research it, because I don't know, from my standpoint, anything that we can do.
Okay. Randy Wagoneer wants to know, she has a question about the BCC meetings. Okay. Can your deputies remove members of the public during public comments just because the chair doesn't like what is being said, and provided speakers are following the rules, or are they still sworn to protect First Amendment rights at all times?
So I think we answered this a little bit earlier, but the short version is no. We don't make decisions to remove people when and how they should be speak, right? So even if your speech is offensive, let's just say it's offensive to me, right? A deputy doesn't make that decision to remove it. The decision to remove a speaker is made by the BCC. They bear the responsibility for that, right? Now, didn't see that. I haven't seen that before, but I will just say this, my caution, and I have cautioned the board before. Again, just because you don't like something somebody says, if it doesn't violate your rules, then you should not be asking deputies to remove people, right? But they can, I know for a fact by law that they can set certain parameters on the rule, how long you speak, what subjects you speak about. And if you get outside of that, they can end the discussion, right? So that is clearly constitutional. You say, well, how is that constitutional? Because one person can't overtake the whole, hijack the meeting, for lack of a way of putting it. But I'm going to say this again for anybody that's listening. Deputies should not be removing people. The Board of County Commissioners should not be removing people because they dislike what is being said. And you know, if it gets over to personally insulting, attack, and they have policies against that, that's fine. They can ask the deputies to remove people, but they should not be doing that simply because they do not like what's being said. If that is happening, if you provide me an instance of that happening, then we'll have some concerns about that. What I would do is look at their policy. I mean, I don't know what their policy is, if I'm being honest. I would look at their policy about how long you can speak, what their rules of what subject you can speak about, and if they are not following that rule, the BCC, then you have a complaint against them in that regard. So, but a deputy's not going to be the one to make that decision unless I'm personally standing there. Yes, I could override that, but a deputy stand there is really simple, very similar to a judge. They're following what they're being asked to do from that standpoint. So the BCC bears that liability.
Very similar to what a judge would ask the deputy to do.
Yeah, very similar.
Okay.
They're both bailiffs, technically. One's a bailiff for the board, one is a bailiff for the...
I just didn't want people to think you were saying judge does what they're told to do.
No.
They're telling the deputy.
Yeah, they're giving direction to the deputy about what they want.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anita Hunter, can we do...
And by the way, I've seen a judge remove somebody for the way they were dressed. You would say, well, that's a freedom of expression.
And my cousin Vinny.
Well, I've seen it in Walton County. I've seen it in Leon County. Yeah, but there were people. But people would say that's my First Amendment. I should dress. Why do I have to dress a certain way? Not my decision to make. So.
I may or may not have been to traffic court many years ago.
Yeah, sure.
And somebody was removed for wearing
I've absolutely
bedroom slippers.
And I've seen people removed for being abusive, or talking past their time, or bringing up subjects outside the thing. You know, so that has happened, and I know they can do that for sure.
Okay. Anita Hunter, can we do something about the trucks, what they call squatters, that are low in the back? It's the Carolina lift, the Carolina squat, I guess is what they call it, and extremely loud. Aren't they illegal? They can't even see over their dash, and they're going to run somebody over.
Yeah, there are rules about how high the bumper can be, but they're not actually illegal. That's the problem. They have there's certain.
I don't think the Carolina lift is illegal.
No, it's not, and that's the issue, right? I mean, it looks ridiculous. It's you know, again, I'm gonna go back to the vehicle inspections. I think there's certain things, you know, if you're on the roadway, for the vehicle to be safe and be able to operate in a certain way, I kind of agree with you about that. I don't think that should be the case, but I don't have the final say on that one.
Okay. Tanya Brooks and Deborah McCormick said thank you, Sheriff, and Dottie Niss said thank you. Tanya Brooks wants to know, why did deputies bring people across the state line and drop them off at 6 a.m? She said, I have pictures to prove it. Why would they be doing that?
Somebody might have needed a ride.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but yeah, it's not uncommon. We've given people rides before. I know, hey, look, I'm stuck. I'm homeless. I'm trying to get to X. I'm trying to return home. Yeah, we give people rides.
Okay.
We do it to Okaloosa County. We've done it to other places on occasion.
Okay.
I just don't know exactly what she's talking about.
Yeah, Tanya, if you want to send me an email.
Sure. We'll look at it and figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
All our cars, you know, I think one thing people got to remember too, all our cars have GPS. And so we know where the vehicle's at. We know how fast they're going. Mm-hmm. And if they have somebody in the car, they have to announce that they have somebody in the car, right? But we also have cameras inside the car. So we know if somebody's in the car, we know where they took the car, we know how long they traveled. So, and we can find out whatever that reason is.
Yeah. Brian Campbell, I think Ron DeSantis recently said marijuana is going to be on the 2024 ballot. Is that a good thing or a bad thing in your eyes?
You know, I think kind of my take on it is this, that the public sentiment has changed on this over a number of years. If you look in Walton County, when medical marijuana was on the ballot 2 years ago, it passed, or longer than 2 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago now, I think it passed by 78% in Walton County. Kind of my general thought about that is you should follow the will of the people. If the people do not believe it's a level of importance to be doing that resource wise, then I don't think we should be in that business. And we'll see what the people say. I mean, we just need to follow. To me, that is very much a low level of importance to me. We're going to follow the law. I mean, we'll follow the law for sure, but I just think people's whole demeanor and attitudes have changed about that over the last 20 years. And but the most important thing is for people to have their voice heard. If you're in favor of it, go out there and vote. If you're not in favor, go out there and vote. You know, I'm a little bit of a libertarian at heart, so I'm probably a bad person to ask. I will do my duty regardless of what that is. I'll follow law whether I like them or not. I don't know that's an appropriate use of resources for us to continue down that pathway with cannabis at this point in time. But again, we'll do it until otherwise dictated.
Okay. Anita Hunter, are we going to get a 4-lane highway? Highway 90 into Funiac Springs has gotten really bad. A lot of crashes and traffic.
I have not heard. I haven't heard any plans to do that. You know, we have been kind of going up and down about trying to get a light at Rock Hill right now, which is, I think, if you guys on 331, I know that's an important thing right now. Just got the turning lane on Site C6, but on 90, I have not heard any plans to do anything on 90, and they really need it. They really need.
Yeah. I believe that FDOT does have a 5-year plan that includes Highway 20, portions of Highway 20.
Yeah, well, that part of 98's been on their 5-year plan for about 20 years, the best I can tell.
I wasn't going to bring that up, but here we are. Shannon Caps is asking, can we get an update on the Artie Rodriguez case? Has it been referred to the state attorney?
Oh, it's way past the state attorney. I mean, it's not way past. It was referred to the state attorney a year or two ago. Yeah, it's in it's in the middle of criminal proceedings. I don't know where they're at. That's really between the prosecutor's office and the defense and his defense counsel, assuming he has one.
And Shannon, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but you can go on the clerk of court website and look up court records. And you'll be able to track
when the hearings are and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's on the Walton County Clerk of Court website. Stephen Chansey said, congrats on the award ceremony. Wonderful people serving our county. I love it when Mike Adkinson comments on the mic to individual winners. That's really great stuff. That's cool.
I forget that mic's on sometimes, so that's
yeah.
Thank you for reminding me.
Your mic's hot, Sheriff. Yeah. Janet Beck on YouTube says, thank you to Lieutenant Cheek for his assistance. Oh, we love hearing that. Thanks for tuning in on YouTube, Janet. Sheena is asking, okay, sorry, she didn't ask a question. Justin Roy, are you willing to correct your prior statements involving volunteer firefighters, Fire 1 personnel, not having the certifications to work fires without Walton County Fire Rescue present? I'm sure you've seen the letter from the State Fire Marshal's office that disagrees with that statement. And are you willing to acknowledge the multiple out-of-district calls Liberty and Argyle have ran as support to Walton County Fire Rescue?
Was that a statement or a question? So let me back up just a second. No, I disagree with you. I think your letter is actually incorrect from about a decade ago. It's what he's referring to as one that came from the Fire Marshal's office. We did ask for the Fire Marshal for an opinion because the attorney, their current attorney, does not necessarily agree with that statement. So I think what happens, you have a complex statute. The issue is about entering into a residence by yourself, which you are not supposed to do as a Fire 1. You can look it up. It's in the Florida Administrative Code. It is pretty clear. So no, we disagree with you. I don't think I've ever said that they didn't run calls to assist in other districts. I don't think that's ever even crossed my lips. So no, we try and do that. And I'll be really clear about this. There is a place for volunteers. We have volunteers at Walton County Fire Rescue. But I want to make sure that somebody's not driving to a fire, for instance, with a vehicle with bald tires or a vehicle that's not appropriate, or that they have the appropriate equipment and training. And I don't think it's too much to ask for the citizens of this county that you provide that. You should provide an updated list showing that you're trained, that your equipment is appropriate. You should want to do that. You should want to be better. Accept the help when help is offered. No more to it. It's not going to cost you anything to do the right thing. Let us help you be better. So it's kind of the short version.
Okay. Tyler Talbot. We need a speed bump in Paxton on 147 on Thomas Drive. People come by here flying at 40 in a 15-mile-an-hour zone.
Ask him if that's a city street. If it's a city street, you need to ask the city of Paxton. If it's a county one, we need to ask the Public Works, the BCC. So that's really the best place to start, because a lot of times we get asked for speed bumps. Got to know where the road is in the city or the county to start with. But whichever entity that is, you send it to your district commissioner. In Paxton, that is Commissioner Glidewell, I believe, right? And if it's in the city, there will be one of your city councilmen, whoever's the appropriate person there.
Yeah, I feel bad. I don't know where 147 is. He said in Paxton on 147 on Thomas Drive. So
I thought that was in the city limits. That's the reason I said that. But I could be wrong about that. You need to double check that.
Okay. James Lawson, I'm just curious, are they going to put a traffic light at Rock Hill Road on 331?
We just addressed Mr. Lawson, I hope so. I think it's needed. Really, I think it's needed. And that coming off of Site C6 is dangerous. I'm glad they put a turning lane in there. I think that's going to help a little bit. But they really need a turning lane onto Rock Hill Road. I'm telling you that. I've seen a lot of people almost wreck there.
Yeah. We've seen a lot of really bad crashes there. Janet Beck says she was thanking for Lieutenant Cheek for his assistance with Miller's Crossing neighborhood. We're glad to hear that. And then Living the Dream JFP on YouTube says, I agree. I think auto inspections are a really good thing.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah. Another question on YouTube. I think about the Carolina lift and just like sagged vehicles on the roadway, and that, and then I'm catching up.
Particularly those LED. Go back to those LED lights. If you're on the Carolina lift and you have that LED light, it is really up in your face. So,
a question on YouTube from Tristan Cluis. Mm-hmm. What about Quinn's land and the legacy we've been seeing on Facebook? I'm not sure if they're Queensland. Are they? You'll have to be more specific, Tristan. And I only say that because Sheriff Quinn McMillan just passed, so I'm not sure if they're talking about them or something else. John Fletcher wants to know, what is the law on LED lights lumens?
Yeah, I don't know. I need to be honest with you. I don't know the lumens off the top of my head, but I can tell you it's too much. Whatever it is too much, because even the dims I really. And I've had several of our older drivers as well say to us, look, Sheriff, it's too bright. I can't see, it's too bright. Yeah. And myself, I've noticed it. I mean, I think I don't know what the standard is. And, the mistake I make, I guess, is I assume if you're selling it at AutoZone or Discount Auto, one of those, that it's legal. But, man, they're bright. And even some really new vehicles are it's so bright.
Yeah. Sandy Dooley. I would just like to thank the county for the good work cleaning up by Bay Grove Road after the storm. Yeah, and I don't know if you saw it, but Sergeant Fannin, Deputy Dean, and I believe it was Deputy McMillan, they were out there with chainsaws. Carla Odell was working a chainsaw in the north end of the county, one of your deputies. So they were out in full force cleaning up after the storm. Thank you, Sandy, for saying that. Means a lot.
And it's important for them to hear you guys say that, too, because they were really out there hustling with it.
Bob and Sharon Parks. We have a lot of people speeding on Walton Road down the road from the high school in front of Pinehurst Estates. Okay. And just to be fair, a lot of our district lieutenants and our deputies watch this. Yeah, I know some.
So they know that they get a call from me after we leave this, and I get off and start calling and say, "Why aren't you doing something about speeding?"
And so it is important for you guys to let us know so that they can kind of allocate resources as they see fit.
And we pass this along to the city too, like in the city of Defuniak, when edge of Walton Road over there, there's in the city in that area. We make sure that they're aware. If you have something that passes on them, I talk to Chief Hurley fairly regularly, and he was in the office Thursday, and we always try to make sure that there's some coordination and discussion. So if you have something that you want to pass along to the city as well, we try to get it to them.
Okay. So. Robert Curry wants you to move the mic a little bit closer to you, but just be careful because it's got the cord. Mike Johnson said, what do you think about the deputy goon squad routinely silencing citizens that civilly exercise their First Amendment rights at Board of County Commission meetings?
I think I probably have answered this for like the third time now, but I will do it again. We're not in the business of determining where someone should or should not speaking. The BCC sets their policies of who can and can't speak. Right? I mean, that's the bottom line. Unless I'm personally standing there, they're not going to override the chair of the Board of County Commissioners go back and review what their policies are. I don't know what the board's policy are. Typically, if you're not out, let me just say this. If you're not outside the board's policy, if you're not demeaning, again, the board doesn't have to like your speech. They can't remove it because they just dislike something. If you're off subject, if you're speaking at a different time or a different subject, or if you're outside the time frame,
which I think is 3 minutes.
I don't know the time frame off the top of my head, but let's just say it's 3 minutes. Or you're outside the sequence, they, under Florida law, have the ability to have a speaker removed from there, step down from the mic, right? I may not, to be honest with you, Mr. Johnson, I may not even like that, but at the end of the day, that's not my call to make. Now, if you provide me or you show me an instance where they are, and I don't watch the board meetings because that's like a couple hours of my life I can't get back watching a board of county commissioner meeting, with all due respect to them. But I will do this because this is the third person that has said something about it. Mm-hmm. If someone has an example specifically that they want me to review personally, and I will do it, I'll go back and look and see if there was an issue that we thought the deputy should not have removed. Now, remember, that's not whether I like it, but whether or not that got outside the scope of what we want them to do. But the chair of the board, their administrator, and really only the chair should call for that. Really only the chairman of the BCC should call for somebody to be removed from there. So if you're not just being disturbed, in other words, you can't stand there and hurl insults at people, right? That can violate some of their rules. But just because you don't like something, just because the board doesn't like it, they can't ask you to be removed from that. So,
okay.
And I'm only somewhat sarcastic only because it's like the third time I've answered it, and I don't know what the parameters were with that. So
okay. John Harrison, our deputies are doing a great job. We have a very professional department. The folks of the county need to know all the good things they're doing. We appreciate you, John. Anita Hunter, we need a traffic light at the end of 1087 and 90. A lot of the sign roads are coming into the 90s are getting so dangerous. It would be and she's asking if it would be a 4-lane soon into Phoenix.
I wish.
Springs. Yeah.
I wish it was as well.
Yeah.
Which one did she say again? Which road was she?
At the end of 1087.
1087. Yeah. A lot of people being rerouted through 1087. I don't know what that's about. Their GPS is taking them down through there.
Why is that?
I don't know the answer to that.
That's weird. Yeah. We just had a Google car ride through the sheriff's office parking lot. So hopefully they'll update some of that. Philip Canterbury, can you get more deputies on 331 South and crack down on speeding, especially during work hours? And I bet some of our
yep, I've got some folks listening right now. We'll be listening.
Yeah. Shannon Lynn is saying there is an instance of that happening at a Board of County Commission meeting. She said he was within his 3 minutes. A subject wasn't even disclosed yet. Hopefully he files a complaint.
And again, I'll review that, and two things happen. So if I review it and I deem it to be an inappropriate removal, what I try to do is then I will myself or the chief deputy will reach out to the chair and the board's attorney and the county administrator and say, we need to caution you. And then we will inform the lieutenant there the next time, the supervisor, to be there and say, look, we need to make sure it doesn't get outside of constitutional requirements and Florida law, period. So, but I would also ask you, just because you guys have brought this up, to look at whatever the rules of the board are, because I didn't watch it and I don't read their rules. Just make sure. You may not like it. You may want them to change their rules, but you need to find out the answer to that. Yeah. And I don't even know what the circumstances were. So
okay. Heather Darby, why do people arrested for fentanyl keep getting a bond and released, especially the ones who are already out on bond within a 3-month period on the same charges?
Yeah, so bonds are set on what's called a bond schedule that's done by the court. The court makes the decision. I have absolutely no say in what bonds are.
We actually focus on bonds in one of our podcasts.
Yeah, in fact, we did do a podcast on bonds. If you want, we're on iTunes.
We're on iTunes and Spotify, yes.
Yeah, and we
it's called The Art of
explain
Policing.
this the art of policing. Yeah, it's the name of our podcast, and we talk about bonds. We don't set bonds, but just in general, I can tell you what the judges base that on. They have a kind of a set of criteria that they can't, in other words, just because, say, for instance, somebody has a fentanyl and they're out on bond and they get another one, they can't say, well, I'm going to give you $1 million bond. They have to fall within certain ranges that's set by the rules of the court. So I don't know exactly what they are, but I know that's the prosecutor will typically argue for a higher bond if they deem that's appropriate, but that's 100% the purview of the court, the county and the circuit court.
Okay. Ted Brown wants to know, what is the status of the independent fire districts in Walton County? What happened after the study?
The last I heard with that, OPAGA, and again, I think people get really confused. OPAGA, the Office of Governmental Accountability, issued 2 reports with critiques and opportunities for improvement for both Liberty and Argyle fire districts. Their last meeting, I think anybody that watched that will, you can draw your own conclusions from there. The board will now have to make a decision whether or not, or the legislature will now make a decision whether or not to place sanctions, follow up, disband, whatever that is, right? A lot of that falls on local representation. They'll have to decide whether or not they file a bill. Typically, somebody doesn't file a bill out of district if it's not your district. I've actually talked to Representative Abbott about this the other day, and this is where people get so confused. And I think he and I we're on the same page with this, which is quit getting caught up on whether or not you like Mike Adkinson. Quit getting caught up on trying to protect your own kingdom and do the right thing for the people you serve. Be better. Be better. Let us help you be better. If you won't let me help you be better, let somebody help you be better. But don't let your ego get somebody hurt. And so if they can get to that standard, I don't know if it's too late for the Florida legislature. I don't know if they've decided, what they're going to do, but we'll see. We'll see. But people deserve better. And if anybody says they don't, they need to sit down and watch that meeting and read the report for themselves.
Yeah.
And if your answer to the report is that APAGA is lying and APAGA is wrong, might take a long look in the mirror. But having said that, understand there are some very good, capable volunteer firefighters in both districts that can do great jobs. But you got to give them the equipment and you got to help them be successful. The last thing I want to see somebody get hurt, a citizen or a volunteer firefighter,
Yeah.
Nothing I say there should be even remotely controversial.
Yeah. Stephen Chansey, what's the newest news on the Manuel Ruiz case? I hope Stephen's bringing that up because he watched or listened to the Deck podcast. So I have this in our talking points. Crime Junkie, very popular podcast, did a break off, a new spin on a podcast called The Deck. And what that focuses on is cold case decks, card playing cards that Crime Stoppers has produced all over the country. And they have partnered with us to focus on different cold cases. And the first one that they released was Manuel Ruiz. Yeah. And Steve Sunday has been working those.
Yeah, I mean, I joke with Investigator Sunday, he's got the payment plan I like, which is nothing down and nothing a month. So, but all joking aside, Investigator Sunday has a wealth of experience. He's very, very determined. And he's up here. I see multiple days a week in his office up here in South Walton, working, trying to bring some closure for these families, and trying to bring some justice. And that's a very noble cause, right? It's tough when these cases are as old as they are. Mm-hmm. We got another one working from 1971, and it becomes so. And by the way, in the 1971 case, we think we have a prime suspect. We had a prime suspect. I know because I got hate mail from their attorney recently. So it's just a lot of things have to come together to be able to make a case when it's that old. But Steve's the right guy for the job, and he's hard at it. So
yeah, Stephen, I would encourage you to listen to the Deck. There's a lot of really unique information in there, and Steve does a great job. Gina Davis wants to know, how many missing people do we have in Walton County? Do you know the answer?
Gina, I don't know off the top of my head, but we do track those because what happens a lot of times, people come and go missing, right? In other words, maybe it's somebody from what you would call a missing. In other words, they walked out of their house. We never found. We recently, unfortunately, recovered the remains of an individual who was missing, had been missing for about 2 months. But we have people sometimes that just up and leave, right? So it's not a crime to not tell anybody before you leave. And then we have people that are runaways. And so there's a pretty significant number over the last, 20 years. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times people come back home and then they don't call us and tell us, right? So we don't always know whether or not they've come back home, and that really that can be tough, But we try to go back so that you understand with a child, for instance, we enter in what's called a child is missing. If you file a report on a missing child, we enter it inside of an hour, and that's nationwide. So if that child has ever recovered anywhere, we'll know about the children. It's more difficult when you have an adult maybe who has potentially substance abuse problems or potentially, emotional problems or family problems, and they don't want this contact. And in their mind, they're not missing. So some of those we don't know about, and that's what makes that tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Missing endangered becomes that next term, which is you're missing, and there's a young man we spent a number of years looking for that is missing endangered out of Niceville, right, in this area. That's a totally different situation where we're very concerned that he was the suspect of foul play.
Yeah. Yeah. Victim of foul play.
Victim of foul play, yes.
Natasha Wright Spence, where do the city limits start on 331 coming into Defuniak?
So it's a little funny because it's on one side of the road. It's up to the hospital. They brought the hospital in on that side of the road. I'm just roughly on the other side of the road, that would be what the east side of the road. It's about the hospital on one side. So the city annexed a couple of 1,000 acres of woods, for lack of a better way of putting it, which runs between 331 and 280, which is a pretty big distance. But there's really, it's woods out there, back behind Pickett's Crossing in that area. So,
thank you for the question. And I'm sure somewhere on the city's website, they would probably have a map of their jurisdiction, I would say. Brian Campbell, if possible, can you have Sheriff Adkinson review the most recent BCC meeting, specifically Dan Macchiero's removal? And we'll look that over.
If you don't mind, Mr. Campbell, if you don't mind just shooting an email, if you can describe about when it happened or what he was wearing, just so I don't have to go through. Those BCC meetings are long sometimes, and I don't know if that was a super long one, and just we'll look and see what they.
John G., what do you think about the First Amendment rights violations that took place at the BCC meeting? And we've sort of, and I'm catching up on questions.
Okay, going back through. Yeah, so I think if you go back and listen to that, we kind of answered that and went back through. I am going to review the one he's talking about, the individual's name.
Campbell. Brian Campbell said to review it, but it's Dan Macchiero.
Yeah, I'll go back and look at that. But also, and just very bluntly, probably need to go back and read what the board's rules are. Mm-hmm. I myself, just because I don't attend those meetings, need to see what parameters they've set up. And if you know this, if you've asked this question about the board meeting, if you know the circumstances, what they were referencing, even before I watch that, go ahead and email it to me, and then I'll review that. If I find, just very, very point, if I look at it and find that I don't think it was an appropriate removal, I'm not going to punish the deputy, so I want to be clear about that, because they were directed to do that. I'm assuming they were directed to do that by the chair. However, I will formally address that with the board, and then we will address having a supervisor there and then take that up with their council, because I don't want our staff being, and I'm not saying the worst, I don't want anybody to misunderstand me. I haven't passed a judgment on it because I haven't seen it, but I take that very seriously. And so and I tell this to you all the time, I don't care whether you like me or not. That's not relevant. You can say whatever you want to say. And the board has to understand that as well too, just because when you're elected, you have to accept certain things. And, I accept it. They have to accept it. If it doesn't violate their pre-established rules and it's not disruptive, or endangering, inciting riot, then you just kind of have to listen to it. And that comes with getting elected. So.
Okay. I'm going to.
That's probably the fifth person that's asked about that. Yeah. So I'm assuming there's something to that just because you guys asking that. So we're going to go back and look. I'm going to make it a point to go back and look at that myself.
Yeah.
This week.
Josh Claney, why does it take 30 minutes for an ambulance to get 10 minutes or less down the road? And how come all the stations do not get toned out from dispatch? How come all the stations don't get toned out?
Well, I'm not sure I fully understand his question. It sounds like he's talking about, if you have a specific instance you're talking about, please send it to us and let us know what that is.
Yeah.
But there's always, look, I wouldn't tone Paxton because something's going on in Windswept, right? I mean, so you wouldn't necessarily tone every station. Now, is it possible, and this happens quite a bit because we don't have a hospital in North Walton right now. We're waiting for that to open. North Florida Doctors Hospital is about to open. But think about this for a second. If the call is in Mossy Head and the unit assigned to Mossy Head has to take somebody to North Florida Medical Center, or if it's out of Station 4 in Defuniak and they have to go to Ascension Sacred Heart, somebody else has to pull up there and get it. So it just depends what the circumstances are.
Yeah, it depends on what the coverage is and the call volume.
Absolutely it does.
Okay.
Which, by the way, is why I believe we needed to add another ambulance. Our plan was to add another ambulance. And every time we do that, it's $1 million, right? It's $1 million for the apparatus and $1 million plus for the crew. But I think ambulance is one of those things we all agree on. Ambulance is not something I don't hear a lot of disagreement about.
Yeah. So. Tristan on YouTube, can we talk about the failure infrastructure-wise regarding Hammock Bay and the Verandas complex in Freeport? Can we address any point of concern that isn't South Walton or Mossy Head?
Actually, we just spent a little bit of time talking about Paxton and Windswept, but yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about Hammock Bay for a little bit a second. So the question was, infrastructure problem there?
Yeah, infrastructure-wise.
So if you may or may not heard me speak about this, but I talked to the board that one of the problems we have is the sheriff's office specifically. We're not made aware of what's being built by either the government or private entities until after it's done. And so a lot of times we come in looking, hey, this is a little bit of a problem for us. I don't want to interfere with private business, right? But at the same time, we need to make sure that we can get deputies, fire trucks, emergency apparatus, wherever it is it needs to go. Mm-hmm. But if he wants to send me if you'll send us a specific what the issue is so that we can look at it, be more than happy to try and see if it can be addressed. But the other thing is to ask your cities, and that's Freeport City Council, is, we would love a public safety review on that. I mean, I think that's, I'm not trying to add cost to it. I don't want governmental extra involvement, but we really would love some public safety. I just think that's something we ought to be doing.
Yeah. John G is asking, why can we not see all the comments? John, that's why, well, you don't see any of them, but I can see them. It's because we're live on multiple platforms. So if you go to YouTube, for example, you'll be able to see the comments that are made on YouTube. If you go to X, where we're also streaming, you can see the comments coming in from X.
It doesn't combine all the comments, which
on Facebook, it doesn't. So I'm using a software where I can see all of them in one shot so that I can ask Sheriff Adkinson in one queue. But if you go to X or if you go to YouTube, you'll be able to see all the comments.
We're up on YouTube, X, Facebook.
And Facebook. Yep.
And Facebook. Okay, that's three.
Joe Burton wants to know, how many job openings are there currently for deputies? Are you getting more applications than in years past?
So, yeah, I would say that for the first time in probably 3 or 4 years, we've actually seen an uptick. We've got a lot of folks that we have put in the academy, and that is hopefully by August, we're going to start seeing some real dividends to that. It's been a tough couple of years. I think COVID was a real impact on that. I think after the George Floyd instance, that had serious impact on us from a deputy standpoint. And I think salaries are always an impact issue. But we are, for the first time in years, I'm really optimistic about that. We're seeing some good applications. We're seeing more applications come in. So I'm hopeful that we are now about to turn a tide on that.
Yeah. Randy Wagoner says, I have a letter from Jimmy Petronas dated January 3rd, 2024, stating that a certified volunteer firefighter or firefighter 1 can enter. I'll be sure to get you a copy of it.
Yeah, you can send 2 copies of it, but here's the reality of it is they have to have the 2 with them to take that life-saving action. So yes, they can enter, they just have to have the 2 with them. So that's accurate. They can go in, they just have to have somebody with them. So hopefully that'll clear that up some.
John G says, can you elaborate on auto inspections that you just agreed with?
Yeah, I think one of the things that auto inspections would be a good thing, it maybe every 2 years, 3 years, when you see things like A lot of times they used to do, and listen, I was actually too young even to do the auto inspections myself, but I know that one of the questions we have is like things like brake inspections, your tires and things like that. That was the kind of stuff they used to look at with auto inspection to make sure that the bumpers are on. All those things are kind of patently visible, but maybe affect the safety of a vehicle's roadworthiness. I don't know how you would do it. I mean, I don't think nobody wants to see lines of people standing out in the government doing that. But if there was some way to make sure that vehicles were roadworthy, it just seems like it would be a positive. Maybe you get a break on your insurance. Maybe it's one of those things, if your vehicle gets a vehicle inspection every 3 years, you would get a break on your insurance. Maybe private industry could handle it better. But I can tell you a lot of our vehicles that we see in traffic accidents, they have brake problems. They're having light problems. They're having no turn signals, things like that. It's the stuff that, most people try to keep up with. And a lot of times you don't even know. But, so maybe the answer isn't government doing it. Maybe it's a break on your insurance. But I think a vehicle inspection, it's just one of those things, kind of like a physical. It's probably just a good thing to do.
Yeah. Another question about lumens violations, like what are you going to do about those? I don't know that we can.
I don't, and just kind of truthful, I don't know what the lumen rule is. I don't know what the brightness level is, but I can tell you some of them that are perfect, that come from the factory, are so bright with these LEDs that they make it very difficult for people to see at night.
Okay. Stephen Chansey says, does Walton County Sheriff's Office ever use temporary workers to help at beach events, concerts, parking, or sports as summer approaches? Where can someone sign up as a possible part-time?
So our posse folks, and again, I'm actually glad you brought that up. Our posse folks donate thousands of hours to the citizens of this county, and they just do tremendous work. And yes, we absolutely, it's kind of the parable of the talents. You tell us what you want to work and how you want to assist. Obviously, we're getting ready for the beaches this year. We're in the process of getting new beach community service officers hired and trained to help us to try and navigate this mess that's going to be the beaches this year. But yeah, we try and use volunteers wherever we can, and our posses just do a great job. Also, the BCC is doing or the TDC, too many initials. The Tourist Development Council is doing beach volunteers as well too. In the north end, for instance, we have people that come, maybe can help answer phones. We have people that assist. We're trying to do crossing guards, and we're looking at doing a crossing guard maybe in Paxton, and and a couple of these, maybe even Mossy Head, to help people get out. And so it's maybe not just the traditional crossing guard helping kids cross the street. It may be helping them get traffic out a little bit easier, And so that's also, we're advertising for that too. But we certainly could use volunteers there as well.
Yeah.
So just let us know where you have an interest, and we'll get you in contact with our posse folks and go from there.
Great. Gina Davis wants to know, do you enforce interference of custody charges in regards to child custody?
We do. Unfortunately, we have to deal with that. That is at least a weekly thing. Okay. If not daily, it's multiple times a week. We deal with that. It's very complex. That's a little bit like the fire thing, if I'm being honest, which is people read a statute and they go, well, it says here that X, and it's in the application that's the issue, right? So we get a lot of parents that maybe, for instance, are holding a custody agreement that says the child will be returned by 5 o'clock, right? But that doesn't mean that we can go snatch the child. I'm not that she's saying this. That doesn't mean we can go bring the child back immediately. A lot of times it means we have to bring them back before the court, or that you have to take them back before the court. But child custody is such a complex issue. But our number one concern when we do child custody is that the safety and well-being of the child. That's number one. Parents, that should be their concern as well too.
Okay. Alan Schnitzer wants to know if 331 Bridge is open for pedestrians. Can people walk it?
No.
Clyde B. Wells.
Yeah, they can. If there's a line, I said that. I'm not going to answer that because I'm going to give you an incorrect answer because I thought there was a jogging lane down the side of it, but I need to double check that. So you've stumped me on that. I need to find the answer to that. But I bet I have a trusty lieutenant listening that's going to give me a traffic answer and pull me out of the fire. I apologize. I don't know off the top of my head. I never see anybody on there, and I haven't actually looked to see if it has the safety apron.
Yeah, I know that there is a
And
sidewalk.
it's funny because I drive it every day of the week.
Yeah,
Multiple
there's a
times a day.
sidewalk up until a certain point,
Yeah.
and I know one goes into the park under the bridge.
Yeah.
But I'm not.
I've
I'm
never
not,
seen anybody do it, so I need
Yeah.
to find the answer to that for you. I
Yeah.
apologize.
Okay. All right. Justin Hamilton, any plans on expanding the trade schooling at the jail, teaching different trades?
Yeah, we always try and look at different things. You know, we actually had a recent discussion about masonry. You know, whether or not some people would have interest in learning a masonry skill, and you know, we have to have enough to make it worthwhile. You know, that it's appropriate use of money, and so that people understand the way we pay for that is we use what's called commissary funds. So inmates, things like they buy things like honey buns or stuff like that, or the phone. Instead of spending them, we try to spend it right there at the jail on training programs. But yes, we look at them pretty regularly. We don't want to do so many that we're not effective. You know, we try to keep it where it's the best return on investment. So
Okay. Ted Brown wants to know, where does funding for flock cameras come from?
general revenue out of my budget, general budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do some communities have MOUs where they pay for them?
Yeah. So let me just flock cameras that we put up, we pay for. There are many neighborhoods that pay for them on their own out of neighborhood funding. So you can put them up privately as well.
Okay.
Or you can pay for them privately.
Etta Elizabeth wants to know, how bad is the fentanyl problem in Walton County? I know a lot of overdoses are not really made public.
Yeah.
How bad is it here?
So, you know, that's kind of a relative term. It's bad. And to me, if anybody dies of it, it's bad, right? What has happened is we used to not see any heroin. I think I was 15, 20 years on the job before I saw any real heroin. Mm-hmm. People were taking different things. It was crack when I started. You know, people did crack cocaine, and then it was methamphetamine. Then it was opioid pills. But with as pills become harder to get, then you get heroin because it's cheaper, and then cheaper than heroin is fentanyl. And so that's really the problem. It's so little, it goes so long. It's a major problem because of the potential harm, not so much from the amount as it is the potential harm. It's cheap, it's easy to use, it's easy to cut, and it's wicked dangerous. So yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah.
It's a problem.
And I have to give credit to Bay County Sheriff's Office. They actually have a billboard up right now that shows the very tip of a pencil. And it has like a little bit of powder on the tip of it. And it says, this can kill you. This amount of fentanyl can kill you. And it's pretty eye-opening.
Yeah. And a lot of people have to realize when they're ODing, they don't know they're getting fentanyl. So that's the other thing. They think they're buying heroin, or they think they're getting something else and they're getting fentanyl. And that's the danger on top of the danger.
Yeah. Your trusty Lieutenant Scott Hogaboom just sent me a text message that said, there is no jog lane or sidewalk that goes over the bridge. There is one that goes under the bridge to the park.
So good. I'm good. I mean,
I asked him in response if there's a bike lane on the bridge, and I know that there's a breakdown lane, there's a shoulder, but I don't think that there's a bike lane.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that you can even bike over it. Mike Johnson, what do you think about Commissioner McCormick committing battery on Alan Osborne at a recent BCC meeting?
So that case I know was referred to the city, and so I just don't want to comment on any of their investigation or whatever it is they're doing from that standpoint. Wouldn't really be appropriate for me to do that.
Okay.
Have they made it? Has a decision been made on that?
I don't know. Yeah. I honestly don't know the answer to that. I know that it was reported to Defuniax Springs PD.
Right. And I did. I mean, I saw Chief Hurley the other day, but I don't know what the status of that was.
Okay. Adam Ramsey, during the summer, for some goofy reason, Google is rerouting people down Business 331 and it's creating traffic congestion in the little town of Freeport. Is there anything your agency can do, possibly reaching out to them, seeing if they will stop suggesting that? I will say, though, that I know that Bart Smith, the lieutenant in Freeport, he knew that was becoming a problem, and he started getting deputies to cut off some of the side roads because it would just get out of control.
Well, I'm hoping that light, I mean, again, if it's Google, it's a little bit different, but I'm hoping that light is really going to solve some problems there. And that's, But that's a good. I've never actually reached out to Google like that, but
Yeah, it might be.
I know exactly what you're talking about when that happens. It's such a pain.
Yeah, great. Great. Sorry, I'm looking for some questions. John G is asking a question. Do you know who Miles Dockery is?
I do not.
Looking for another question.
Miles Dockery. No.
No. Justin Hamilton. Any plans to expand the trade schooling at the county jail? Okay, sorry. Yep, I'm catching up. Mike Johnson, what security plans are in place to ensure the public is protected from violent commissioners at BCC meetings?
Hadn't actually witnessed a violent commissioner. But having said that, a commissioner under Florida law is granted no more special privilege in regard to the safety and well-being of a citizen than anybody else, right? The same laws apply across the board. So that's kind of just the short version of that. Nothing about being elected relieves you of your obligations, right? Yeah, and the other thing is, I love everybody. Everybody talks about their rights, and nobody talks about their responsibilities, right? So we have a responsibility as elected officials, and citizens as well too, to conduct ourselves a certain way, right? And somebody said to me that, hey, about why I don't get upset about this or that, or what people say or do from that standpoint in regard to myself. And I said, look, because I can only control my behavior, good, bad, or indifferent. I can only control what I do. And if I try to control what people do or say, and I respond to that, then first of all, it would be outside of my character to do that. But second of all, you can get yourself in trouble. And that's what I would caution any commissioner, any elected official, any city, county, state employee, whatever, is to conduct yourself a certain way. And I realize it can be frustrating for, it sounds like I'm beating up on the elected officials or the county officials. That's not the case. It can be difficult. And I get it, because sometimes citizens feel that any level of behavior is appropriate from them toward elected officials. I disagree with that. However, I'm not going to stoop to that level. That's the short version. But I'm not going to allow an elected official or anyone else to violate somebody's rights.
Okay. Natasha Spence, what are the statistics for overdoses from fentanyl in 2023?
Do not know those off the top of my head. I can tell you, I looked at all overdoses, and let's just assume, what percentage are fentanyl of that. I couldn't even tell you, but I can tell you the overdose numbers that South Walton Fire District and Walton County Fire Rescue, as part of the sheriff's office, responded to, were significant. There were significant, and by what I mean by significant, hundreds of times. Now, understand that can be the same person multiple times, right? So that happens pretty frequently.
Okay. John G wants to know, how much does an entry-level deputy at Walton County Sheriff's Office make, and how much does your PIO make?
Our entry-level deputy makes, so they're paid on a 2180 pay scale. So they would make about $52,000 a year, give or take. So PIO roughly makes roughly between 85 and 90,000. Yeah, somewhere in that ballpark.
Okay. And just for clarification, the deputies are hourly?
Yep, that's correct. One of them's salary, the other is hourly, a little bit different benefits package, whole 9 yards. But yeah, that's the short version.
Okay. Sorry, I'm looking.
But I tell you one thing: if you can't tell when it comes to these, that's one of those things that people always try to say to elicit a response, right? You shouldn't do this or you should do that. The truth is that our public information office is critical to the success of this organization. It's not a matter of value of what is more important, because life safety is in and of itself the single most important thing. The problem is you have more deputies, more firefighters that we have to budget and pay for. That's a bigger impact, right? So it's just one of those things where you have to kind of assign it. You didn't ask what IT people make. They're paid pretty well too, but I can't do IT either, right? My accountant makes significant.
I don't think a lot of people can do what IT does.
Yeah, I don't pay with the
or accounting for that matter. Yeah.
Or the vet.
Yeah.
The vet,
yes.
for sure too.
Yes.
Or the psychologist. Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Nikolov wants to know, do you have data comparing the rate of violent crimes in the county between 2022 and 2023? Is there a pattern of increasing or decreasing? It's funny, we just had this conversation.
So here's the thing, and you can quote me on this one.
Okay.
the percentage of index crimes, the crimes that we track, that the FBI, the Uniform Crime Bureau, is lower now in Walton County than it was in 2010. There are less index crimes, property, persons crimes in Walton County today than there was in 2010. Now you can slice that any way you want to slice it. That is a mark of success, and that's the minimum of this organization.
Yeah, and I also,
we're going to print those because somebody said that's not true. Well, read them and weep.
Yeah,
read them and weep. It's good.
Even in the last 3 years,
phenomenal.
We've really had a great decrease in car burglaries.
Yeah,
where we were in the hundreds, now we're
at a, keep in mind, we also went from, give or take, between 2010, roughly 55,000 people to 90,000 people. We went from 3 million visitors to 5 million people, and we have reduced the overall amount of crime. That's not me. I don't take credit for that. But I think it's a lot of things working in factor, and with the men and women of this organization, which I'm super proud of them. I think they've done a heck of a job with that. So,
great. Looking for a question here. Sarah Ann wants to know, I'm wondering why the Sandestin shooting was not listed as a mass shooting. Under federal guidelines, it fits the definition. She's asked me this before on Nextdoor, and I'm not sure where would this be listed as.
So the definition of mass shooting, it was an attempted mass shooting because of the number of people they shot. Mass shooting is typically is 4 or more that hit. So that was the issue, right? Or 4 more.
Victims.
4 more. There's more victims than that, but they have to be. So the number of people shot, the number of people killed. By the way, the same thing was true of the Chilean incident a few years ago. So it was certainly an active attempted mass shooter. He was attempting to kill, 10 or 12 people there for sure. That would be my definition. So sometimes I get in trouble because I'll say mass shooter. He was an attempted mass shooter, and somebody said, well, that's not true. You're being dishonest. He's not a mass shooter. I kind of think the same way she does. That if you're trying to kill that many people, that kind of gets you there in my book. So.
But it wasn't in this case because of the amount of
number
people.
Of victims, yes.
Okay. That were actually hit by.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. So because what you actually had is 3 people actually shot. It's when they ticked the 4th. You had 1 person killed, right, and the other 2 that were shot. So it didn't meet the federal requirement for that or the federal descriptor for that.
Yeah. And again, I'm just kind of scrolling through. Sure. I'm looking for questions. Mark Anglin, can something be done about the speeding on Twin Lakes Drive? And I believe Twin Lakes is in the city.
It is, but listen, we can absolutely. I'll reach out to the police department and make them aware of it too. But you're concerned. But if you want, and even if you want to email them or you can send us an email, we will send it to. The PD and make sure they're aware of it as well. And go ahead and put the time, if there's a time frame specific, you want to do that as well.
Okay. Ted Brown, can a citizen pay for a flock camera if it's not available in the WCSO budget? Yes, you can.
Yes. A lot of people do actually, or not a lot. It's becoming more, yes.
Okay. Dakota Croteau says, I think you should clean up Highway 20 across from the church as you come into Freeport from Ebro. It looks horrible for like a half a mile. I mean, I wish the sheriff's office could.
Yeah, no. So that we get back in the code enforcement. That's really a code issue. We can reach out to that's actually in the city limits there. So I don't know. I'm going to show my ignorance.
I'm trying to think of where he's talking.
There may not be a code officer in Freeport
from Ebro, coming into Freeport. It looks horrible for like a half a mile.
If it's in county, if you'll just shoot the address, we'll send it to county code.
Dakota, just if you can, email us and just let me know what area you're talking about. I drive it. Listen, there's plenty of areas I'm like, man, I wish somebody would get out here and clean up this property or whatever. Just send us some info about what area you're talking about. And there's a lot of comments like back and forth between people. I'm looking for questions that you guys want asked. Okay. Okay. Sorry, I'm looking through questions. All right. Velma Jan Lockhart. Once the Walton County Sheriff's Office hires more deputies, will the North End have more deputies to cover our area? We've never seen a deputy on duty from Paxton to Mossy Head, like designated there.
No, that's you have a deputy that's assigned there, signed every day, 24/7 in that area. However, again, that is a huge area. That's over 100 square miles, about 110 square miles there. So anytime one of them moves out of that district or even from that little zone, what it's called, at any time, yeah, it can be. We would definitely like to have more people. We have the same problem in Red Bay because it's such a big area. There's not so much a number of people as it is. It takes time to get a deputy from one place to the other. So if the deputy in Paxton even has to run to the station, even has to run to our main station, that's a 20-minute drive. Mm-hmm. And so you have to put somebody else in the district to cover them. But the short answer is yes, we're trying to get more, but I want to be clear, there's somebody assigned there all the time.
Okay. Great. I'm looking for some questions. How about those plastic PVC chains on Scenic Gulf Drive? Ted Brown he put one of my favorite emojis on his question, which is like where the smoke is coming out of your nose. Yeah. Code enforcement has an open complaint now. So, and Ted, I think I forwarded you that email. So we'll follow up with them and just see where they are in that process. John Polk, why is the sheriff's office using undercover vehicles, the gray Explorer and a pickup truck to conduct traffic stops on Chat Holly with no official markings?
Sure. It's a very routine, very common for agencies to use unmarked vehicles. A lot of that has to do for aggressive driving, right? And distracted driving, so it gives us a better opportunity to see you before you see us. Most traffic is voluntary compliance. We don't fund ourselves off traffic tickets, but that is to catch people who are abusing the speed laws or putting people at risk. So yeah, it's there for a reason. We don't like to use them at night as much, quite frankly, because they're not clearly marked. So we try to use our traffic units mostly during the day for that reason, but that's fine. And they'll always be in uniform. They'll always be a fully light package, and they'll always have a camera on them. But that's fine.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm looking for questions. On X, the question is from Modern Observer. What are the local sheriffs doing about illegal aliens in our state and in our communities?
So we have about an hour. I mean, it's going to be kind of real short. We participate in what's called the 287G program, which the sheriff's offices, in other words, that we are compliant and work with federal authorities in regard to those folks that have detainers or warrants filed against them. So we are fully compliant in that regard. In fact, we just held a town hall meeting with ICE a week ago.
Yes, last Wednesday.
Discussing our position. But kind of in detail, if you want to go look at the Art of Policing podcast, we do about an hour podcast on local law enforcement and immigration, what the laws were. It's very, very complex, contrary to popular belief. It is.
Yeah, and
there's a lot to it.
Yeah,
but we kind of explain not only our role, but what local law enforcement's role is in general with that. So yeah, check that out on Spotify or iTunes.
Yeah, and I can drop the link in your comment once we're offline. Tanya Amnovich says, thank you for starting a mounted posse. I noticed they were used in a recent search. Will that open up to non-sworn citizens?
I think so at some point. Yeah, I think that's the plan.
Okay.
That's really, Lieutenant Wayne Grandstaff spent a lot of time working on that. I want to give him credit for that because he spent a lot of years trying to get it up and moving. And sometimes bureaucracy's slow, but boy, they did a good job of that. And Lieutenant Grandstaff stayed with that, and that's a good thing.
Okay.
Glad to see it.
John Wren Sr. says, joining late, wanted to shout out to your department for the quick response in Hammock Bay over the Christmas holidays. He was out of town and noticed motion activation on one of his outdoor cameras. I looked at the video and saw a person running from my front gate to my backyard. At 12:14, I called the non-emergency line to request a deputy. At 12:24, just 10 minutes later, A deputy triggered the same camera. What a response time. He said he's a retired firefighter, so he knows the importance of great response times. Great job. And next question. Sorry, I'm going to go through some of these. Dakota Croteau says, if it's an election year, do we have any runners against the sheriff?
Nope. I'm sure we will.
Looking for another question here. Tiance Blackburn wants to know, what were the 3 deputies willing to do to get the citizen to quit asking questions at the city council meeting? And I'm not sure if they're talking about the Walton County Board of County Commissioners meeting or the city council meeting.
I think we've answered this a couple times. That's more of a statement than it is a question, really.
Randy wants to know, speaking of overdoses, do your deputies carry, oh my goodness, nasal Narcan, and can volunteer firefighters carry it per your medical director? If not, how can we change this? You actually have a very specific position on Narcan.
Yes. All our medical staff carries Narcan, and yes, the volunteers can all get the Narcan. Here's the only concern with Narcan with the deputies, and this is the reason why, because in Florida, the heat. So that Narcan has to replace about every 35 days. It becomes to the point that what we don't want to do is them to give them something that's not effective, if that makes sense. Because the medical response is so fast in South Walton and in North Walton in regards to that, so we simultaneously dispatch. Because the sheriff's office handles the dispatch, both comes out at the same time. So typically our EMS and fire personnel can get there pretty close to the same time as the deputy. The heat of a vehicle makes the medicine degrade very, very quick. And we've heard this from a lot of sheriffs across state because there's a big push to put that out. I'm not anti-giving it to the deputies. I'm just trying to figure out how to make it work. Because once that heat gets to a certain level, it degrades rapidly. Yeah. But it's a good thing. And I think the more people we get the hands of it in, I think it's not, there's no reason not to try and get it as long as we can just keep it in a working factor. Yeah.
Okay. On YouTube, Eclipse wants to know, I heard a light was going up in Mossy Head at Blackstone and 90, but can we get one for 1087 and 90? That's actually the second time somebody has asked us about that intersection tonight. Sarah Ann wants to know, why is the Sandestin shooter not being charged with manslaughter? Well,
so typically,
he is charged with attempted murder right now.
Yeah. So what happens is you typically charge with an open count, like an open count of murder, and then the state adds the charges as appropriate or ups the charge. So you typically do not necessarily lay all the charges out there. So don't get too concerned about that. They're going to go through and say which is the best charge that fits, and what is it. And this is going to be a capital case. So I'm sure that's. And capital meaning up to and including the death penalty would be on the table. So what they charge with now is a little bit irrelevant. They want to make sure they put the right charges on at the right time. Yeah.
And a lot goes into that. So they don't always charge right away.
No. We don't know. Yeah. A lot of times we won't even charge, not even, for instance, in that case, you could just charge somebody with a weapons charge and not even charge with a shooting, or just the shooting but not the death, right? So it just takes time to lay it on there. That doesn't change the eventual outcome. It's just part of the process.
Yeah. Okay. Another question on YouTube from, as an elected official, what drugs besides medical marijuana can you take if someone recommends it? So as an elected official, you can take medical marijuana if it's
actually here's kind of my short version of this. Well, I can't because of my licensure. However, that is probably about to change too. So I'm not a doctor, and I don't even remotely attempt to say what I can as a medical, what is or is not appropriate for a medical professional to prescribe. So whatever they prescribe is what they prescribe.
Okay. Another question on YouTube. What happened at Emerald Coast Middle School? I don't know the answer to that. If it happened today or within the last few hours, or we've been on here. So if you have a specific question about a specific instance, just send us an email, and we'll get it back to you. Kimberly Thrasher says, can you speak on why your deputies don't always follow your body camera policy? What would be a reason for that to happen?
No, I mean, if you're referring to a specific incident, I'd have to know what that is and have to review it. But there's always a reason, right? Maybe it may not be a good one, but there may be a perfectly good reason. You know, we try to be sensitive to the public's desire. If somebody is not the suspect of a crime, not then they ask us to turn the camera off, we'll do that. There's certain times we try to make, you know, I know you find this hard to believe, but a lot of times it's a sport for people. They like to watch and see other people suffering. And so we literally get cameras, requests to see video cameras all the time, when it's really nothing more than I want to know what the inside of Corey's house looks like, you know, and some of that stuff. So we have people on occasions, hey, will you do X, Y, Z, will you turn it off? And we try to give a little bit of discretion if it's not in a criminal investigation, if there's not a reason for not the performance of an actual duty there, you know, and you ask them, they'll generally turn that thing off. Just that's possible. But if you have a specific instance, go ahead and email, let us know, and we'll look into it.
Okay. And one of our trustee lieutenants is watching. The ECMS question was in regards to a medical call involving someone at a sports function.
Okay.
So they just got a medical call there. We have two people following up about what your PIO makes. They said you didn't answer the second part of the question. What does the PIO make?
No, I did answer it actually. I said between 80 and 95,000. Yeah, in the ballpark. A couple different ranges there. But that's interesting because I did specifically make sure I answered that.
Okay. I'm looking at Stephen Chansey wants to know what is, and he said flog, but what a flock camera is.
Yeah, it's a camera that records and allows us to go back and search for vehicles. It's a short version of it.
Okay. Dakota Croteau is saying, I want to congratulate Deputy Hartzell and Van Cleve for their excellent work. They deserve raises.
Somebody might complain about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Morgan Lee Gentle says, how can the TNR program with feral cats work with Walton County Sheriff's Office? I feel that when passion, community, and ethics come together, we can all help this situation. Thank you. TNR, Lindsay, fill me in on TNR. Is that trap?
Trap and then
trap, neuter, release. Yeah. Okay. How can they work with the animal services to fix the feral cat problem?
So, I mean, I think a couple of things. One, there's such an impassioned feeling on both sides of how you should handle this, because there are people that believe, hey, we shouldn't release, right? I mean, there's certainly an argument on that side. I know what we try to do. We try very hard to get to the point that we are a no-kill shelter. We're not, but we try very hard to get to that point. I think with the volunteers over there and the folks that are really working to try and do that, and we couldn't talk about volunteers. We couldn't run without volunteers at the animal shelter with what they're doing. What I would say is reach out to Captain Hogaboom. She oversees the animal shelter there. And let's sit down, and we're always willing to review what the opportunities are. And if there's a way to do something better, then we can certainly look at doing it. Yeah, I understand. But I think she was implying that the ordinance could be changed.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe there's an argument for that. I just don't want to speak to it because I'm not really informed enough to make an appropriate judgment.
Okay. Kimberly Thrasher, do you think that you, the sheriff, being over internal affairs for your department is a conflict of interest?
Oh, no, not at all. In fact, it's that, just to be clear, it works that way in every agency in the United States of America. So why would it? Because at the end of the day, I'm the person you're going to hold responsible for it. If it's not done correctly, I'm going to be held responsible for it. So if I shipped it out and said, oh, I don't know what's going on, I'm not sure, I'm not the one that handles that, you would say, hey, Sheriff, you're not doing your job. You've got to be able to police it. Somebody's ultimately got to be responsible. And so if you can't tell me who's responsible, you can't hold me accountable. You have to know I'm responsible so that you can hold me accountable.
Yeah.
Hope that makes sense. And it's, by the way, it's like that in every law enforcement and military entity in the United States.
Okay. Dakota wants to know, why did code enforcement tell me he can only cover code violations outside of Freeport? It didn't make any sense to me. I asked the gentleman in Freeport. Is that does the city have their own?
City has their own. I mean, Honestly, I don't know the answer to that, but I would assume it because maybe doesn't have an agreement with the county. Freeport may not have an agreement with the county code enforcement.
Okay.
Apologize, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Jillian Sutherland, are there any plans to expand the size of the animal shelter to meet the demands of animal surrenders in our county?
We have been talking about that. I know that was an issue. We're looking at building a master building plan over the next 15, 20 years for the whole sheriff's office suite of services, but I know for a fact that's been a discussion, yes.
Okay. Tristan Cluis on YouTube. Last question, respectfully. It feels like South Walton takes priority to North Walton during the growing annual busy season. Homes vandalized, locals attacked. Your plan for this is what?
When you're saying it takes a plan to make sure they're not a precedence? Is that I just want to make sure I understand the question.
Maybe.
I think it's more, not so much as the precedent is, that's where the attention goes from the public, right? So we don't pull staffing, to just kind of give you an example, we don't reduce the staffing in the north end to assist the south end. Does that make sense? We still make sure that our staffing stays the same. What happens is we end up having to pay overtime and off-duty details. So we never reduce the staffing in Freeport or Paxton or Defuniak or anything like that to cover the south end. Now, maybe one night in the middle of the night something happens and we pull from either end, but we don't rob Peter to pay Paul when it comes to that. But we do have to spend a bunch of extra money because it's generated by the number of calls coming in. And interesting enough, more deputies end up half time working in and around Defuniak. A lot of people don't realize that. Defuniak is actually our busiest single district is around Defuniak. And so what happens a lot of times is the deputies will be pulled from the north end to work to assist with something in Defuniak.
Okay.
That's just kind of the nature of it. So, but a lot of it is because people are posting more or they're seeing more. So that just, it kind of adds to, well, that's more important. It's not more important. It just happens to be busy at that time.
Okay. Dakota, to answer your question about code enforcement, Lieutenant Bart Smith, so this is your third lieutenant to text message me during this, says once a code complaint is filed with the city of Freeport, they have an agreement with county code so that the county officer can investigate and report to the city, who can then enforce the actions as they deem appropriate. So it has to be filed with the city of Freeport, then county code takes investigation, and then they report to the city, who then enforces the actions. So there's a little bit of a process to it. He can't originate a complaint.
Correct.
In other words, I think that's what Lieutenant Smith was trying to tell me. Okay, let me go back to where our questions are. Okay, I'm looking for questions. Sorry.
Okay.
Randy said, I have free nasal Narcan secured for the volunteer fire districts that can be replaced. Does it have to come from your department from volunteers?
No,
Does it have to come from your
there's a
department
couple ways it
from
can get done. The medical director of the county, so we have a medical director, they have to approve the way things are dispensed and dispersed. But yeah, that can get worked. If it's a matter of they want to get dispersed, we can get it dispersed. Make sure that's done correctly within. There's just certain rules when you start dispersing this kind of medication, really any medication. Okay. So what they can do is the volunteer districts can reach out to Chief Austin Pugh, and let him know the why, and then he can coordinate that through the medical director to make sure that all the standards are met.
Kimberly Thrasher is asking, do you always ignore a citizen's request for you to follow up with them personally when they feel like your deputies and investigators failed to do their job? Do you turn...
Do I always ignore? Well, my schedule would suggest otherwise. I spend a fair bit of time talking to people who are unhappy. So this is part of what we do. Now, always reserve the right to make sure that try to be handled at the lowest possible level. And there's just times that somebody's not going to be happy. And that can't always fix that too. I don't think I've ever actually had a request from her before. I don't know that I've ever received that, but I try to return every phone call. And I try to see everybody that I can, but there are times that, our schedules don't meet, or just quite frankly, I'm not going to be able to make you happy. And at the end of the day, then we're not going to continue to meet and you go, you're not giving me what I want. So sometimes the answer is no. And that's just unfortunately part of life. I wish it was different, but that's the way it is.
Randy is asking, are you willing to have a meeting with me and Patronus on the phone to settle the firefighter 1, firefighter 2 confusion?
No, because I don't think you actually have any standing in that regard. I mean, the chief financial officer, and quite frankly, I don't need to be involved in it either. That's something they need to work out with with the fire board and the fire chief, not with the sheriff. And they need to make sure they're in compliance. But I will tell you this: we'll have a definitive answer. We actually just sent a review back to the state fire marshal's office because we felt that letter was improperly applied, and it was pretty clear what happened when we read it. Is if you say, can they go in? Yes, they can go in with a 2. Now, if the fire marshal's office change their position, they can change their position. Absolutely, we'll change our position on it too. Still need to correct all the other deficiencies and all the other issues. And all of us should work toward getting the best level of service possible. But the sooner they stop worrying about it being Mike Adkinson, and the sooner we start just being the best you can be, then it's going to be better for the citizens of those districts, both of them. You got some really dedicated people out there that are trying to work as volunteer firefighters. Let's get them the equipment and training they need and quit worrying about who's in charge.
Sheena Almonte is asking, can you do something about the meth labs on Business 331 between the elementary and high school? That's in Lieutenant Smith's district. He's already.
If you want to go ahead and reach out to us, and maybe with some specifics, that would help quite a bit. And Lieutenant Smith can follow up with you, and we'll be happy to sit down and talk to you. We love nothing better than we've made kind of a living out there in that area in the last couple of years.
Okay. Another question on YouTube from Eclipse YT. There are a few deputies who catch an attitude during traffic stops that I see frequently on the side of the road. Do they take classes on how not to escalate a situation?
Yeah, we actually have we do a customer service. But we're one of the few agencies that do customer service. But listen, deputies are human just like everybody else too. And one of the things we see, because we watch a fair amount of these videos, and it's interesting, you'll see somebody cuss a deputy out, and then if the deputy raises their voice, they file a rudeness complaint. Now, I'm not saying that's always what it is. My point is they're human too. And, yes, we have to maintain a higher level of professionalism than the public does, but it sure helps when the public helps too, So, but if you have a specific complaint, we'll review it and kind of go forward from there. But rudeness is not something we certainly want to work toward eliminate that.
And this isn't me trying to like flip the script here, but we have some deputies who make hundreds of traffic stops and haven't had a single complaint filed against them. So,
and that's part of it. And some people have bad days, good days, and we all do different, different levels of engagement.
Yeah. Theodore Brown, what is Walton County Sheriff's Office policy for a deputy returning a call in the field and activating their body camera and recording that citizen without their knowledge? Like, can you return a call?
So he's talking about a couple of different things here. If it's just typically running and you say that it's on, it's perfectly fine. You don't want to surreptitiously record. In other words, you have to if you have a reasonable expectation of privacy, right? So a reasonable expectation of privacy is if I call you random, not work related, it's not reasonable to believe that you're being recorded. If you're calling a deputy sheriff and you know that they have a body camera on, it's reasonable to believe you're being recorded, right? So that's kind of that's a really short, vague answer to what can be a complex situation.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
I was trying to think the scope of these questions have been all over.
They really have.
For an hour and a half. Somebody said the other day, you need to be transparent. I'm like, you mean like more transparent than answering questions that I don't see every 2 hours, twice a month? I don't see anybody else signing up for this gig.
Elizabeth O'Brien says, "Hi, Sheriff. Someone I know wanted me to let you know that dinner is ready."
Yeah, it was ready about an hour ago. Yeah, trust me, I get it.
Okay. We got a question about are we currently hiring? We are. We're always hiring. WaltonSO.org and just click on career opportunities. We are always hiring. And Mike Nessett is asking, how long does code enforcement keep recordings of their body camera recordings? I don't
have any involvement with code past that. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that. There's some public records responsibilities. I'm not sure if it's different for code, so you'd have to ask them.
Okay. Alexander Labonte, is there any motive in the Sandestin shooting?
Because it's going to trial, I don't want to speak to motive at all, but I can tell you that nothing that would make sense to you.
Okay. Charles Marino, why is it illegal to vape in Walton County?
It's not. I don't know what he's talking about.
Okay. Okay. We're caught up. I know that's shocking.
Yeah.
We've been on about almost 3 hours, right? 5:30. Yeah, almost 3 hours. 15 minutes shy of 3 hours. Does it feel like that? Am I doing that math right? Holy
no,
cow!
It's 5:30 to 7:30. Oh, 2
Yeah.
hours.
2 hours.
2 hours.
Woo.
2 hours.
See, my brain is fried. Yeah. So we're caught up. We're caught up on questions.
I told you I wouldn't guarantee you like the answer. I guarantee you I'd try and get you one. How about that?
Yes. So it's been.
And we didn't remove anybody from the podcast. We did not violate anybody's constitutional right by throwing them off the podcast. How about that, too?
Yes.
Although some of y'all frankly could use it, but that's here and there. We didn't do it, right? So, listen, we try to do this in a timely manner to get your questions answered and to at least point you in the right direction. You know, and it's kind of like I said to one of the callers, I can't guarantee that that no might be the answer, right? And that's okay, but we're not hiding from you. You know where we're at, and we try to do our best to give you the best perspective of what your organization is doing. So, if you have a question, email us, call us, come see us. And if we won't meet with you after a couple of times and do that, maybe you're crazy. Could be you. Anyway, we appreciate you. Look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.